Every so often, a bit like in prison when they come and start, everybody has their cell, shaken down. The matron used to come in and sort of shake down the cell, as it were. And there he was sitting. It was ridiculous. He scuttled off like this kind of miscreant and was sitting there canoodling, as I wrote it, with his, what did I say, his blow-up doll, Marla. And it was stunning because it was just, the idea that he'd still be harboring such fury that he would actually empty a glass of wine down a reporter's back. And then one just realized that he was really changing. And I think something happened, in those years.
That's fascinating.
The bankruptcy, maybe the bankruptcy took him into this kind of internal panic or something, but he never was the same as he was at the beginning, when he was actually quite a sort of New York character of a certain kind that wasn't as malign in a way as he became.
I know. Now, when did Spy magazine start covering him?
Spy was around about the same time.
Yeah.
I think that greatly probably annoyed him.
Yeah, maybe
because he doesn't like being laughed at.
Yeah.
But I guess if he just stayed in business, he would have just seemed to be a particular kind of 80s figure who'd kind of come and gone.
Right.
But Trump Tower was really the gold tower with the waterfall and the funny financing, as it were, was the kind of leading indicator of the era when you think about it.
Yeah. So, Tina, when I started reading the Vanity Fair's diary, I thought, I'm going to underline a few things so I can know what I want to talk to her about. And soon I realized I was literally underlining every sentence and every page. So I stopped underlining. But there is something I want to read. This sentence, and there's so many like this, but this one kind of actually made me gasp just because it was so great when I read it. All right, so you have driven
Brown.
Yeah, TBD with Tina Brown. It's so interesting. It's like Terry Gross meets the New Yorker Radio Hour. And
thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful listening. And so your first interview was with Jill Soloway, who's the creator of Transparent. And Jill had been married to a man, but now she's non-binary and gender non-conforming. And I was really interested, or actually surprised, that you said that you were, as the interview drew closer, you described yourself as being increasingly daunted by the prospect of meeting her. And you also said something that surprised me. You said, I saw someone whose gender journey has truly set them free, and I felt unexpectedly envious. The pursuit of glamour is such a burdensome bore.
Right.
You still do look very glamorous.
Well, thank you very much. I'm definitely entered my buzz cut phase. I'm looking now. I just want to be. I thought she was great because she seems to have found a way to just completely sort of jump out of who she was and change herself and embrace a new her. Yeah. And I love that. I think a lot of us are burdened by the people we were or people we wanted to be, used to be, want to be, and don't really want to be anymore, and yet you sort of, out of habit, go on being that person. I think there will be nothing better than to... Actually, what I really want to do is I want to be stomping around in thick stockings and country brogues and with tight silver curls. And I don't know, I just, Clemmy Churchill, wouldn't that be nice to kind of feel? But she actually, of course, was played by Kristen Scott Thomas, who looked absolutely divine at all times. Yeah. So I don't think that really applies. But I think American women are not allowed to age. It's just such a bore.
Yeah, it's a bore. I think
it's
we all
such
agree.
A bore. Everybody spends all their time
trying to fight it.
Trying to fight it.
Yeah, like tomorrow you should look younger than you did yesterday.
Right.
If you're doing things right. Great. So why don't we have some questions from the audience? I'm sure people have great questions.
Hello.
Hi, Tina. I absolutely love the diaries.
Oh, thank you.
Vanity Fair has been my favorite magazine.
Hey.
I particularly enjoyed...
Would put Emily Blunt on the... I think I might want to put Robert Mueller with no shirt off, actually. I don't know. I just think... I actually think that the zeitgeist now is not celebrity. I think the zeitgeist now is completely news. I think... people are much more interested in news right now than they are in stars, funnily enough. Unless they're the sort of the big four, unless it's sort of Beyonce but even then they have to be saying something newsworthy. People are not just, during the 80s, if you put Tom Cruise on the cover, you're pretty safe in terms of, but because the newsstand is gone and the newsstand is now irrelevant. It's a different thing. I actually think I think the Saudi Arabia story has been, that would be something I would be all over if I was at Vanity Fair now. I would be doing MBS and the Court of Saudi, and, I would really want to do that in a big way, actually. But, covers, it's interesting, covers are still so potent. I'm not sure that anything is going to replace the potency of a cover. I mean, you saw when Time magazine put the journalists on the cover, it was an event. You can still make something in the culture an event by putting it on the cover. And I think there may be some kind of come around to that. I mean, a whole generation is coming in who are digital natives. Obviously, they've already arrived. And it might be that print becomes something cooler at a certain point. If you've been raised purely as digital natives, maybe print will start to become something that's like a vintage...
like records.
Yeah, exactly, that it's possible. But covers are incredibly important and so potent.
I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about books you've read when you were a kid, how you became a writer, how you kind of how you became, from your earlier years, seminal moments about reading and writing and stuff.
Well, poetry was a huge thing for me. That's really where I developed my great love of writing and reading, in a sense. My mother always valued poetry and used to read it to me, and I became enormously involved with poetry and writing it out. I used to write out poems all the time. When I was young, I used to write poetry. And from there, really, when I went to Oxford, it was really, again, poetry. It was Yeats, Eliot, Keats, and also the great Victorian novelists, George Eliot, Dickens, and then moving on to Thackeray. These were the people who just consumed my love and interest, and the sort of the moral widening that gives you. The sense. I mean, George Eliot, particularly, I loved her expanding of my intellect and moral universe, I suppose is the word. So reading and writing has always been what I spend most of my time doing. I just read a wonderful book by Stephen Greenblatt called Tyrant, which is about Shakespeare's tyrants and what they and what the society. What societies are created, how tyrants get created, and how the culture is ripened to welcome a tyrant. It's very interesting, and I just had him on my podcast. You'll hear him on January the 1st. That's the joy of a podcast. Nobody can tell you what you can't do.
Right, and it's so pure. It's just...
So I'm going to have a Shakespeare scholar, and I'm going to talk about tyrant. So there.
Given that a big part of what you needed to do was really have a future vision as you were working on all of these places, what would you say are some of the most surprising things you see happening culturally right now?
Surprising. Well, I mean, it's not really a surprise because it's just happening. But the speed and madness with which it's happening, I mean, the vortex of media disintegration has become a furious pace, And I suppose the ongoing revelations of Facebook's malfeasance, the fact that every other week now it seems like a further, perpetration of some fresh sort of transgression, if you like, and how it's now penetrated every platform. That's now become, I think, that's really the thing that I'm most agitated about, and sort of increasingly surprised, by how much these platforms have been hijacked and what kind of fake stuff is pouring out of them. And I don't know how we close the barn door out of it. It's very worrying. Maria Ressler, the great journalist in the Philippines, who founded the site Rappler, which stands up to the tyrant, Duterte. I mean, she will tell you that her country is now what she calls it a Facebook nation. That it's been hijacked by the regime to pump out horrible lies and ethnic smears and things that get people absolutely agitated, and it's become really a dangerous thing. So that worries me a great deal. I spend a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
It's terrifying.
I mean...
You've mentioned that you've dealt with both Harvey Weinstein and Donald Trump. What's been your winning formula over your career of how to deal with very difficult people?
I don't think I did deal very well with Harvey Weinstein. I mean, talk closed because, it just didn't work. I mean, I'm not easy to bully. I don't get bullied because problem.
You're
But
like too young and too old.
But maybe women themselves have to say, you know what, it's okay. I'm going to play an old lady now.
Yeah.
I mean, not an old lady, but somebody. There you are. So I can't even say that.
Yeah, you
word.
can't even say that word. You're going viral now.
I mean, Judi Dench doesn't have that issue. She's quite happy to play.
I think we saw that recently in the U.S. with Glenn Close.
Right. Well, Glenn Close was absolutely fantastic in that film. One of the things that's wonderful about now, with all of this, two things. First of all the streaming content is really opened up a huge amount, of avenues. So suddenly, artists are getting to be asked to do things they would never could have done before. Secondly, the panic after Me Too has made everybody so scared that they've got to hire women. So now, women, we've got to have a story about women. That's great news. So I'm sure Glenn Close, I haven't talked to her about it, but I bet the wife might not have got done, recently. But that's a fantastic film, and she is amazing in it. Absolutely amazing. I'm so happy you like that. I thought it was great, too.
Let's have one more question.
I must have her on my podcast. I will do it.
There's been studies recently comparing how men apply for jobs that they only have 35% of qualifications in a particular job application. Women tend to apply for something they've got 75 to 90% of the qualifications. In other words, they're selling themselves short. You were editor of Tatler at 125. Were you picked for it, or did you apply for it? And what happened there?
Well, I stumbled into it because the owner of the magazine, it was a small, tiny little shiny sheet. It was failing. This realtor came into town and decided he wanted to own media, so he bought it and he wanted to turn it into a proper glossy magazine. And so he asked everybody to edit it, and they all said no because it was such a kind of unpromising looking opportunity, and the money was very tiny. And somebody, a mutual friend, sort of said to him, well, you better, you won't get anybody to do it. You better go for youth. You better find somebody young and then put in a kind of advisor with that person because you're not going to find anybody. And I had been writing for various publications, and I'd got kind of a reputation as a writer at that point. And so he asked me if I wanted to do it, and he put in a kind of senior person on top of me, but after about 3 weeks, I managed to get rid of the senior person because I took to it and I realized I knew how to do it, so I was just lucky. It was one of those lucky things. I mean, lucky breaks are lucky breaks, and it was a lucky break. And, I think, I say, when people say to me, oh, my daughter wants to go into journalism and, what should she do or whatever, or my son, I always say, go and work for something that's a small ailing thing, some little thing. Don't go and work for the Boston Globe.
Right, no.
I mean, when you're that age, because you're going to be a tiny cog in this huge thing with all of these big shots.
Great experience.
Yeah, you've got to go and edit something called the Boston Flea Pit or something. that is some small
see a rush
thing,
of applications now.
with a circulation of whatever, and 6 people.
That's perfect advice.
And then you're going to do everything. You're going to write the headlines. You're going to do the thing. You're going to learn how it gets published. How you're going to have to deal with it, finding an advertiser, and it's much, much better training.
It's such smart advice. Yeah. Well, Tina Brown, thank you so much for talking to us. Your book is wonderful.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Beth.
And Tina's going to be signing books. Where are you signing?